General Custer notified them of his impending expedition and mentioned that they might be called to serve. Upon his return, young Hawk chose to end his service, but his father insisted that he should continue. Subsequently, Son of the Star received a correspondence from Custer requesting more scouts. It was declared that Son of the Star would hold a council in his residence, and many individuals attended. Son of the Star addressed the assembly stating, "My boys, I have received a letter from a white man requesting some of you to serve as scouts." He informed them that they would be serving under Longhair, Custer, which was not unexpected, as they were already aware of his plans for another expedition. Furthermore, Son of the Star had visited Washington. His words resonated with everyone present, and all that was needed to be said was, "I will go." Young Hawk's father proclaimed, "I will go, and my son will accompany me." Those who committed to go at this time and later enlisted included Bob-tailed Bull, Stabbed, Charging Bull, Horns in Front, Young Hawk, Bull in the Water, Little Brave, Bloody Knife, Tall Bear, High Bear, One Feather, Running Wolf, Red Star, Strikes Two, Howling Wolf, White Eagle, Crooked Horn, Scabby Wolf, Pretty Face, Curly Head, Black Fox, and One Horn. Some scouts had already re-enlisted at Fort Lincoln and were in active service. Red Bear was asked to remain by Crooked Horn so that they could return to Fort Lincoln together, and he consented. Fred Girard guided them to the office of the commanding officer, presenting Red Bear's permit. After a short wait, he informed them that they were to enlist, obtain uniforms, and acquire weapons. Following the medical examination, Girard escorted them to Custer's office, where they met Custer's brother, Tom, who bore a scar on his face. He raised his hand, prompting Jared to instruct the Indians to do likewise. Custer entered shortly thereafter and communicated through Jared that they were the final scouts to enlist. Due to the expedition's imminent readiness, they were required to remain on duty at Fort Lincoln. The soldier and Bob-tailed Bull met Custer at his encampment by the riverbank within his tent, with Girard acting as the interpreter. Custer remarked, "Bob-tailed Bull, standing right before me, is genuinely kind-hearted and possesses commendable character. I am pleased to have him here. I am glad he chose to enlist. The forthcoming expedition will be demanding, but we will all confront the same challenges together. I am truly happy to have him in my group, and I express this feeling in Washington. We will live and fight as one, akin to children of the same parents. The great-grandfather has devised a plan. The Sioux camps have united, and it is essential for you and me to work together for the Great Father and support one another. The Great Father is satisfied that it was straightforward, requiring few words, to persuade Son of the Star to supply scouts for the tasks ahead. He is also pleased with Son of the Star's collaboration in advancing the Great Father's plan. Personally, I am prepared to assist in any manner I can, and you must do likewise. This is the situation, my brothers. If regrettably we lose any of the men provided by Son of the Star, their contributions will not be overlooked by the government. Although their families will mourn their loss, there will be some comfort in the compensation that the United States government will offer." Bob-tailed Bull replied, "That is reassuring to hear, my brother. My children and other family members will benefit from my salary and additional rewards. I appreciate you bringing this up because I recognize there is some advantage even if I lose my life." Custer then proclaimed, "No further words are necessary. Bob-tailed Bull is designated as the leader, and the soldier will serve as the second in command of the scouts." It was early in the morning when the bugle sounded, signaling the camp to disperse, and the march began. The army organized itself in formation toward the fort. Girard informed the scouts that they would have their own company, and they were the first to parade on the fort grounds. The parade concluded and the march commenced, led by Custer. 4 Dakota scouts who had been stationed at Fort Lincoln joined the Arikara. Among these scouts were Karu, Matoksha, Makpiaska, White Cloud, and Buffalo Ancestor. The initial encampment was established on both banks of the Heart River. A herd of cattle accompanied the march to supply beef for the soldiers. He noticed them during the first day's march. The white soldiers received their wages at this camp, but the scouts did not receive any payment, as they had only just enlisted. 2 Arikara scouts, Stabbed and Goose, were sent ahead with a letter to deliver to the camp across the river. On the opposite side, there were Crow scouts and their interpreter, a man wearing a calfskin vest, Mitch Boyer, crossed the river to inform them about it. When Custer's army arrived at Camp 20, Red Star observed the army marching up the Yellowstone from across the river. Stabbed and Goose returned to Custer's camp and provided their report. Camp 20 served as the primary camp for the infantry, the band, all the wagons, and some of the mules. An inspection of the horses belonging to the scouts and the cavalry occurred at this site. They dismantled the camp and continued marching with the band playing continuously. Custer and Bloody Knife passed by, and Bloody Knife conveyed, "The general says we are all marching. There are numerous enemies in the region. If we attack their camp and are defeated, we must retreat in small groups. You scouts must not flee nor return to your homes." The subsequent order specified that if our command broke up into squads or individual horsemen, this camp would be the designated location for reassembling all those who had scattered. Personally, I was delighted to hear the band playing as far as we could hear. Some cannons were being transported. We reached the mouth of the Tongue River, where a camp was established. We marched up to a hill overlooking the Elk River and then descended to the mouth of the Tongue River. Right at this site was an abandoned Dakota camp. There lay the remains of a soldier encircled by clubs and sticks, indicating he had been brutally beaten to death, leaving only bones behind. Custer remained motionless for a considerable time, looking down at the soldier's remains. They found a burial scaffold decorated with alternating black and red uprights, representing the burial of a valiant man. Custer commanded the scaffold to be taken apart, instructing Isaiah Dorman, an African-American man, to remove the garments and wrappings from the body. As they turned the body, a partially healed wound just beneath the right shoulder became apparent. The scaffold also held small rawhide bags containing horn spoons and unfinished moccasins. Isaiah disposed of the body in the river, and later, while fishing there, it is presumed he used it as bait. They established a camp in this location and the next day crossed the Tongue River, navigated the Badlands, and set up a camp at the mouth of the Rosebud. A steamboat was available, aiding in the transport of cannons across the Yellowstone. The group waited while the scouts ventured upstream. 2 days later, the scouts returned with information about significant Dakota trails on both banks of the Rosebud. Across the Yellowstone, there was another camp situated opposite this one. 6 Crow Scouts and an interpreter crossed over from that camp. They dismantled the camp and moved up the Rosebud River. Howling Wolf, Running Wolf, and Curly Head were sent back from this camp with correspondence to the base camp. Mules were provided at this camp for transporting supplies, with the scouts receiving 5 mules for their provisions. Gerard informed them that he wished for them to perform their death songs, anticipating the forthcoming battle due to the spotted Dakota Trail. With Fitz Lee at the helm, Colonel Thomas Munford assumed command of his cavalry division. Pickett's 3 brigades converged on Petersburg, led by Brigadier Generals Montgomery Corse and George Stewart, along with Colonel Robert Mayo, who was in charge of Brigadier General William Terry's brigade. On March 29th, Pickett's division boarded trains in Richmond, heading towards Sutherland Station. Fitz Lee soon modified his orders to Sheridan on the eve of Littlefield's advance, advising him to maneuver around the enemy if feasible. The following morning, March 30th, amidst persistent rain, Sheridan set out to execute Grant's orders. He instructed Merritt to take Devon's 1st Division and scout north towards Five Forks. However, shortly after Devon's cavalry began their mission, Grant sent another message instructing Sheridan to suspend the operation due to heavy rainfall and poor road conditions. Considering this a significant mistake, Sheridan rode to Grant's headquarters and persuaded him to continue with the operation. On March 31st, Pickett readied his forces for an assault against Sheridan. The forefront of Pickett's contingent included cavalry units from Rooney Lee's and Rosser's divisions, while Pickett's infantry constituted the main force. They directed their efforts westward to target Sheridan's left flank. By mid-morning, the rain had ceased. At that moment, Brigadier General Rufus Beringer's forces from Rooney Lee's division engaged with the 2nd New York Mounted Rifles, part of Brigadier General Charles Smith's cavalry brigade. During this encounter, the Confederate troops managed to drive the Union cavalry back across Fitzgerald Ford, the southernmost crossing of Chamberlain's Creek, and the nearest ford to Dinwiddie Courthouse. On the eastern side of the crossing, the New Yorkers received assistance from the 6th Ohio Cavalry, who opened fire on the Confederate cavalrymen across the stream. As the Confederate horsemen retreated, Smith dispatched a unit from the 1st Maine Cavalry to pursue them. After navigating through the rain-swollen ford, they confronted Beringer's Tar Heel cavalry and were compelled to withdraw. Under heavy fire, dismounted soldiers from the 4th North Carolina Cavalry charged through in pursuit of the Union forces. This bold maneuver quickly placed them in urgent need of reinforcements. A squadron from Brigadier General Richard Beall's brigade was the next to cross the ford, followed closely by the 2nd North Carolina Cavalry. A short distance to the north, the 1st North Carolina Cavalry also crossed the stream. Troopers from both the 1st Maine and 6th Ohio Cavalry fired their carbines at the Virginia soldiers, forcing them to retreat back to Beringer's lines for safety. By mid-afternoon, Beringer initiated another offensive. The 2nd North Carolina Cavalry encountered significant resistance from entrenched Federal cavalrymen who had fortified their positions by that time. The 1st North Carolina Cavalry crossed north of the ford, only to be met with fierce gunfire. At this juncture, Rooney Lee resolved to deploy all 4 regiments from Brigadier General Richard Beall's brigade in an attempt to overwhelm the Union forces. The combined might of Beringer's and Beall's Confederate brigades proved sufficient to drive the Federals into retreat. At Danza's Ford, the northernmost crossing of Chamberlain's Creek, Pickett's infantry and Rosser's cavalry made an attempt to cross. A detachment from Major General Henry Davies' 1st Brigade of Crook's 2nd Division was stationed to guard this ford. Although most of Davies' troops had moved south to support Smith, they were returning upon hearing the sounds of combat at Danza's Ford. Davie urged his remaining soldiers to advance for support, just as Corse's brigade, leading Pickett's lengthy column, approached the crossing. The Virginians forded the creek and quickly overpowered Davies' detachment, coinciding with Davies' arrival at the site. He dispatched Colonel Matthew Avery's 10th New York Cavalry to impede the progress of Pickett's advancing infantry. Avery instructed his men to dismount, but Corse's troops responded with precise volleys, compelling them to remount in haste. As Davies' 2 cavalry brigades neared Five Forks by mid-afternoon, they heard the sounds of battle emanating from the southwest. Accompanied by a regiment of Michigan cavalry, Davie moved toward the gunfire, only to encounter his own men retreating in disarray. Unable to effectively rally them, Davie sent a message requesting Colonel Charles Fitzhugh to advance his 2nd Brigade for support against Pickett's advancing forces. Evidence indicated that rain had fallen at this camp, as the sod surrounding the tent circles had been disturbed to divert the water. From this vantage point, they could see in the distance the hill known as Custer's Last Look, located approximately 12 miles away. They made their way towards these hills, intending to pause briefly for supper before continuing through the night. This makeshift camp was established on both sides of the Rosebud River, and it became quite dark after they completed their meal. Across the Rosebud, Crooked Horn called out to Strikes the Lodge, Saddle Up, and Red Star, along with Red Foolish Bear, Black Fox, and Bull. Led by Forked Horn, this group set off, and it was here that Red Bear discovered that Bobtailed Bull had gone ahead and departed around noon. This signified the beginning of the night march, and they rode throughout the night. At dawn, they arrived at the designated location for breakfast, feeling weary and dismounting for a short rest. Bull in the Water and Red Bear took charge of unpacking 1 mule, and the former suggested, "Let us prepare breakfast, for if we are to journey to the happy hunting grounds, we should do so with full bellies." While gathering water for their breakfast, they had to navigate through the soldiers' camp. The soldiers were sprawled in groups on the ground, snoring, as they were utterly exhausted and had lain down where they had unsaddled. As the camp dispersed, the horses trotted, and the army paused on a hill where Custer descended to join them. His orders were to advance quickly and capture the Dakota horses. Stabbed rode around on horseback, surveying the area and urging the young men to act with bravery. "Young men, keep your courage. Do not consider yourselves as children," he stated. "Today will be a challenging battle. We have been informed that a large Sioux camp lies ahead. When we encounter a wounded buffalo bull, we experience fear, despite the lack of bullets that could harm us." Acknowledging that many among us were youthful and inexperienced, he sought to prepare them for their first genuine battle. He maintained a distance while articulating these words, rubbing clay between his hands. Then he prayed, "My Father, on this day I remember the promises you have made to me. I speak to you on behalf of my young men." Following this, he called upon the young men, instructing them to lift their shirts so that he could apply the powerful medicine to their bodies. They approached him one by one. He spat on the clay and then applied it to their chests. This clay had been brought specifically for this purpose. The mule train carrying supplies was left behind, and Pretty Face was tasked with overseeing it. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.